we're gonna go to forestry, talk about all the trees that are surrounding us here, and what kind of a question for the panel. You know, with we had about, I guess, 750,000 housing starts in the U.S. last year, and the projection is that will increase a bit, maybe 1 million housing starts. How do we be competitive in that? How do we supply our local mills with the timber that they need off of our public lands? Kind of what's the background on that? What are we doing that's successful? What do we need to do? And we've got a great panel, a lot of experience here, and we've got Ken Winke from Boise, he's procurement manager, purchases timber sales to supply the veneer mills in the area. He's been in that business for quite a while. Ed Riley is a former planner with the BLM and the Forest Service. He's a lot of experience on the government side in terms of how you lay these things out, what the obstacles are, and how you get through the stuff. He's a current member of the Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative. And Dave Schott here on the end with the Southern Oregon Timber Industries Association. A lot of experience with the timber industry, and he's going to speak about that. And then Commissioner Simon Hare, our seasoned veteran over in Josephine County. He's been there 2 years.
Been there for 25 years.
Well, it feels like it. And Simon has been serving on the governor's O&C task force to try to develop some recommendations that can be supported fairly broadly, and it's a big task, and maybe Simon can report on that a little bit. At the same time, Simon tries to run a county that with or without timber receipts, and I know there's some huge challenges there. So let's get started. We're going to start with Ken, and Ken, you give some slides for us. Okay, we'll get started, Ken. Thanks.
Yeah, great. I appreciate being asked to speak here. I spoke at the Oregon Business Plan meeting in Portland, and what they wanted me to do, and what I did, is primarily present the opportunities that we have in the forest wood products industry to help promote jobs in Oregon, and also what opportunities our forests actually present to us in that. Just to start with, I've worked for Boise Cascade here in Medford about 30 years. The education part of the equation here, I've got a degree from Oregon State University in forest engineering. So, a lot of the people I work with are actually trained professionals in the wood products, forest products management industry. What we do, I guess, is we've got a mill in White City. It's a veneer mill, and they peel veneer for the Medford plywood plant that we have not far from here down Old Highway 99. And we have another plant in Rogue Valley that does plywood, and it's idle currently, but we're currently hiring employees to run that mill, and that will produce more plywood and serve our White City engineered wood products mill. And then we've also got a mill in Willamina up in Northwest Oregon, and we purchase logs to run that veneer mill. So primarily we just peel the logs that we purchase either from private sources of timber and timber sales, or from the federal government and other county and state sources of timber sales. Manufacturing facilities are here, as I told you, but we're primarily focused on producing the highest, best product that we can, most value-oriented product out of the trees that we harvest and manufacture. Primary product that we need is Douglas fir that has a high-strength veneer that comes from the tight grain Douglas fir that's in Southern Oregon. These are the products that we're primarily focused on. It's an I-beam primarily. The two flanges on that I-beam are produced from high-strength Douglas fir that's peeled from the primarily local sources of timber, as well as the Versalam beam there, and we're capable of laying up veneer in lengths of 66 feet long by 4 by 4. And we produce that product out of trees that are range from anywhere from 5 inches up to a maximum at our White City veneer mill of about 46 inches or so, but our primary focus is on from 6 to about 24-inch diameter logs, making those types of products to try and make the most strength product out of those trees. Southern Oregon, as I said, focuses on the Douglas fir here. The problem that we've had is this drop in federal forest harvest over the last 2 or 3 decades, primarily as a result of the spotted owl and other species management issues that the Forest Service and BLM faces. You can see that the harvest there has dropped, and a large drop was in about early 1990 or so on that federal forest land line there. That's kind of kind of an orange line. Drop clear down. The green line that's shown there is the private forest land harvest over those decades has remained fairly stable. And I would say in a sustainable harvest level. They might harvest 90% of their growth each year. This is the open mills that were in existence in 1980 when the first spotted owl issues started to arise and the court issues started to arise. Here's open mills in 2010, and the black shows the closed mills over that time period. Actually down in southwest Oregon, one of those yellow dots is gone now because we tore out recently our sawmill over in White City. We used to saw large pine and other pine logs, and we no longer have that mill. That's been torn out. Others are, I'm sure, going to turn black over the next decade. Employment over that period of time has gone from, just direct mill employment has gone from 45,000 down to about 15,000 in 2010, which is a substantial percentage drop in employment that people working directly for those mills. What this doesn't show are the employment drop as a result of the forest, basically the forest management people that we have, who are the loggers, the slash crews, the truckers, everyone associated with actual work in the woods that as a result of that, and the numbers are substantially higher as a result in terms of the job losses. This is the drop in the BLM sale program here for Oregon, and that large decline is back in the late 80s, early 90s. As you can see, it kind of bounced along the bottom there for the last few decades. This shows a slide of just the Medford BLM timber sale program. The red bar actually shows what those forests in Medford, out of the Medford district grow, which is roughly about over 250 million board feet a year. The yellow bar shows what the Northwest Forest Plan, which is what Bill Clinton came to Oregon to present and develop, what the Northwest Forest Plan would have harvested, which is about 57 million board feet. The blue bar is actually what the Medford BLM here sold, and the purple bar shows what cleared the hurdles of the appeal protest process, basically. So you can see the purple, the percentage of the actual growth is extreme in terms of the percentage of growth that we're putting on these forests each year. Like I say, the purple bar is what actually runs our mills. That's the material that we can actually bring to the mill and run the mill. That 2011, I believe, that lowest bar there was a result of suits brought by KS Wild and other environmental groups to stop our timber sales in the port systems. That's about 4 million feet, which would run our mill. It wouldn't even run our mill for a day. Or actually, it would run our mill for, I think, it's about 2 to 3 weeks, something like that. So that you can see that the amount of volume that clears the protest appeal process isn't enough to maintain our current infrastructure is what it amounts to, which is basically us and Murphy Veneer, who purchase logs into the valley. This is the export logs that leave our shores for other countries from the western United States, and you can see the increase in 2010 and 11 primarily as a result of the China export. Those are primarily private logs that are exported, and so that's a source of supply that leaves us and isn't available to us in any normal way. And so our position right now is to try and increase the federal land harvesting to alleviate that issue. This is just an example of what the federal government has come up with to replace the funding of the counties for the timber that isn't harvested. It's called Title I Secure Rural Schools dollars, and you can see that in 2001 it was authorized at 237 million feet, or $1 million a year. It's dropped down to about $98 million in 2011. I think it's about $60 million expected in 2012. Those funds aren't available to the counties to fund our services for sheriff's departments and others, and maintain the prison populations. This is an example of the Rogue Siskiyou National Forest, what it grows annually, a billion board feet a year. Annual mortality is about 264 million feet a year, actually just trees that die. In 80 to 89, they sold 383 million feet. This last decade, 2000 to 2009, they only sold around 38 million feet a year, which is a very small fraction of the growth. It's about 5% of the actual annual growth is all. This is an example of what the forest grows. The yellow bar is what they actually average annually sell each year. You can see the substantial amount of standing inventory that adds every year to the forest fire hazard out there. So you can see there's a large problem with fire hazard, and our forests are developing an unhealthy state basically as a result of this lack of harvest. A lot of the harvesting that has been proposed in the last decade or so has been partial cutting. Those sales that are partial cutting and thinning projects are still protested by these groups, held up in court. About 60% of Oregon's forest lands are federal lands. They only produce about 12% of the volume that's harvested in Oregon each year. And basically what we need is some legislative solution that will fix the issues that I've just presented. The governor has established what he would like to find as an Oregon solution to this issue. He's developed a group led by Tom Tuckman that are trying to develop alternatives for the forest management issue that would serve the public and also the timber industry that currently exists at this time. So we're hopeful that they'll find some solutions to this crisis in terms of forest management. My point of view is that what they need to do is come up with a solution that will serve the forest well, that will serve our recreational industry and businesses well, that's compatible with what the public thinks the forests need to look like, as well as serve the species that they need to serve relative to the Endangered Species Act and other species management issues that they have to face. So, and I really do believe for Southern Oregon, based on a partial cutting regime, that we can find a solution somewhere in the middle that serves retail, the recreational industry, the businesses that desire to have good forests here in the area, that will attract people and want to live in the area, that will attract the kids from the cities that want to come here to develop their education and actually grow into high-tech or whatever kind of job they want to take here in Southern Oregon. But right now there's huge opportunity, and we need all to work towards that goal.
Thank you, Ken. And Boise been working closely with the Southern Oregon Collaborative on their pilot projects. There was a project called Pilot Joe in the Applegate Valley that Jim's showing me his ears, he can't hear back there. Sorry about that. Just going to say Boise was working with the collaborative on the Pilot Joe project in the Applegate Valley. They ended up purchasing that timber sale that did come out, and that's an effort that's trying to be replicated, trying to find solutions, ways of being collaborative and getting out timber sales. So Ed's going to cover that for a few minutes. I know we don't have a lot of time, so go ahead, Ed.
I'm going to stand up here. This is live still, in? So my name's Ed Riley. Recently retired from the Forest Service BLM. Last 10 years with the BLM. Worked as a planner and putting together these projects and dealing with these appeals and protests, and right in the midst of it, and I'm kind of glad to be out of it. But I still dabbled in forest. I own some forest land with my family. We harvest timber, and I still have a great understanding and concern about how we manage these forests. Another thing I want to say is the economic interests are really important, but as Oregonians, our identity is with these forests, and it's a really important part of who we are. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of some policy, some ecology, economics, and some collaborative ideas here. The O&C lands, you've all heard about those, and the counties, Ken talked about that, established in 1937. It was a different world 75 years ago about how we viewed our forests. Ecology, ecosystems, that stuff wasn't really thought about then. The idea back then was that we would have this forest resource and we'd march through it in a regulated way, like a tree farm, on a 60 or 80 year rotation, and every 10 years we could go through there, cut the trees down, and have a sustained yield. And old forests were looked at not as a deficit, as a problem. They weren't producing, and people didn't value their contribution to the ecology and to species needs. Ken talked a little bit about the Northwest Forest Plan in 1994, trying to resolve some of these issues between conservation and production. Forest harvest levels in the greater Pacific Northwest dropped 80%. And this idea of ecosystem management, all these parts being managed, not just fiber production. And the Medford District BLM dropped by about half, and Ken showed pretty well the results of that. And this is the Northwest Forest Plan map, which shows what the intent there was: large set-asides for different types of activities. And so you see those green areas were focused on old growth, late sterile species, spotted owl needs, and the brown areas, there's a laser on this. No? Thanks. Here, down here, these brown areas are BLM, and the matrix area was considered where timber production, and it was a fairly industrial model of timber production that was expected. High levels of production, clear cutting could take place, and none of that really wound up taking place in the last 20 years. All the conservation efforts were engaged and fully implemented, but the production never materialized. This is a chart of the Medford District and the Northwest Forest Plan land allocations, and you see here that about 75% is dedicated to other values than timber production. And so this small 22% or so of timber production land is what we continue to argue about how we manage that. So realize that the land base has really shrunk down. And production versus conservation, all these values out here. And this is how we settle things in the courts. And this is not working. It stalls for years and years, and takes a lot of effort from the federal agencies to deal with these court cases versus high-quality project planning. So into the ecology aspects of it, I think most of you in Southern Oregon understand about fire. These forests were shaped by fire, maintained by fire. Different intensities of fire resulted in different stand conditions. You have surface fires, low ground fires crept around, kept the forest clean. You occasionally had stand replacement fires that regenerated the forest, renewed it, gave those early sterile species and habitats for those critters that like those. And you had mixed severity fires, which opened up small pockets and regenerated openings for pine species, etc. But the most profound ecological system that we have and process we have going on now is this lack of fire, where these stands just keep encroaching on each other and competitive stress. We have stands like this, ponderosa pine stands, where Douglas fir has come in as an understory species about half the age. The ponderosa pine can't regenerate because there's not enough sunlight in there, so we lose that plant community out there. We have large hardwoods that are extremely important for mast production, for acorns, for cavities, for wildlife, and they're being choked out by this Douglas fir with the lack of fire to open stands up and keep this competition reduced. We have stands like this, just a tangled mess, that if a fire gets in there, look at how quickly it's going to spread to that. And if you look at the vigor of these trees, they're very small crowns, and their ability to persist over time is limited. And they're going to wind up dying off, and we're just going to have this continued cycle of trees that can't differentiate and grow to be the big trees that society desires. Okay. That's not a clear cut, that's a natural opening. I want people to understand that our area is like that. I got to run through a few things real quick. Can I take another 1 or 2 minutes? Economics. These small trees, you can't just harvest these tiny little trees. You got to have trees between 10 to 20 inch to make this stuff work. 8-inch trees, 27,000 to make 1 million board feet. 20-inch trees, 2,700. Scale of economics. 1 million board feet runs the mill for 3 days. What the collaborative is trying to do is get a set of agreed upon guidelines that the federal agencies can use that will stem away these protests and appeals and get projects planned that are agreed upon early in there. And we're also trying to inform the BLM's new forest planning effort. We have a couple of, I'll skip over that. It addresses the recovery of the spotted owl, which is an enormous effort that's going on here. What we've done is look at contracting methods. These sales, these projects have to pay their way. We can't subsidize our way out of these things. We have generated a map of where economic viable timber sales can be done, where we need to subsidize, and where we can break even on these projects. And we have watershed-based planning efforts that integrate all this and predict where these volumes are. These are 2 shots of the Pilot Joe project. This is an opening here to regenerate ponderosa pine. This is something that people value. It's not a clear cut. They still think this is a good working forest, and this is generally agreed as a good solution. And this is what it looks like from a distance. This is one of these thinning projects. You still have a forest intact, and people are generally accepting of these type of forest values. Thanks for your indulgence.
Thank you, Ed. So the idea is to scale up that sort of project, and they're working on a project now, Pilot Thompson. I thought it was interesting, Dave, with a timber sale up in Butte Falls, called the Fine Maple sale, that you got involved in and sort of intervened. There was an appeal on it. It was an ecological forest sale, but it had a commercial unit involved, and there was an appeal on the other side, not the environmental side, but it was sold, I believe, to Rough and Ready. They liked the timber that was being sold. Dave intervened, and I think kind of helped get that through. So, but anyway, Dave, go ahead. You got a few minutes.
Okay. One of the things that Jeff asked us to address initially was how do we harvest more timber off the federal forests in Southern Oregon. In one word, we don't. It's not going to happen. The current state of affairs, at the very top, there is no will at the top, the president and the head of the agencies, to increase harvest levels in Southern Oregon. It's not going to happen. They decreased funding for the U.S. Forest Service by 10%. That's going to make a 25% reduction in their planned timber harvest for this coming year. The BLM's lost 39 people because they have more success moving timber up in the Willamette Valley. It's translating to even less and less timber down here. We're harvesting less than 3% of annual growth. in the federal lands in Southern Oregon right now. Annual growth. We grow over 1 billion board feet a year. That's enough to make 85,000 homes. And we're not using any of it. What we are doing, we're causing, we've got a story of potential here. We have potential to either do some really good stuff, create jobs. For every 1 million board feet of lumber or timber that is harvested, we create between 8 and 9 jobs, direct jobs. We also create 8 or 9 indirect jobs, truckers, transportation, people that sell saws, the whole thing. The other potential is we have the potential to lose our forests. And they are so sick right now, they are so overgrown that we will have fires. We are the most fire-prone area in the state of Oregon. We have more lightning strikes down here per acre than anywhere in the state. We have the only dry side, west side of the Cascade ecosystem. We are akin to eastern Oregon because we have those dry conditions. The Biscuit Fire of 10 years ago was a disaster. It's going to be nothing compared to what's going to happen in the future. We squandered between 4 and 5 billion board feet of timber in that fire that was not salvaged. They originally planned to take 1.2 billion board feet out, scale it back down to 500 million, 300 million, they got 60 million feet out of it, just because of delaying tactics from the environmental groups. So after 4 years, it was virtually useless. We need a national policy to utilize our natural resources. We have lost the will in this country to use our natural resources, our federal natural resources. We could be energy self-sufficient, we could be timber self-sufficient. We don't have that direction. And somehow we've got to get it reestablished. We could be so successful in Southern Oregon, we could have 2 or 3 or 4 more sawmills if we just had used half of annual growth. These mills here would be set for life. It's not going to happen unless we have a change of national will. And that's basic. If you look around this room, everything in this room came out of the ground. Everything. Tables, chairs, glasses. The original place where it came from was the ground. Everything we use comes out of the ground, one way or the other. It's using their natural resources. If we don't use ours, we're using somebody else's. Chinese, Vietnamese, whatever. We're crazy. But we've got to start getting back to where we are a producer nation and not a consumer nation.
Thank you, Dave. So given that background, let's talk to Simon a little bit as far as whether the governor's idea of having an Oregon solution, kind of trying to put something forward, has got a chance, and we'll see. Simon, what's been your experience on that panel?
It's been nothing short of interesting. Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Hare. I'm Josephine County Commissioner, and frankly, not given a whole lot of time probably keeps me out of trouble as far as saying something I shouldn't. This governor's task force has been sworn to secrecy. I'm sure they got some blood out of me someplace throughout the last 12 weeks to prove that. But serving with some really great people who are going to try to solve this problem. And so I have a whole page full of notes here that some of it I probably shouldn't say, but I think it's been framed really well. What I wanted to just kind of leave you with, and I think I'm given an opportunity to answer questions here at the end, so maybe that's the best opportunity to go into some of this. But there are trees on the carpet of the House floor in Salem. If you ever get a chance to go up there and you go into the House side of the Capitol building, I think that's very telling to say that when we don't have that basic resource management in order, our house isn't in order, no pun intended. But until we get that done, everything we're talking about as far as bringing engineers, having doctors, we have 1 in 900 doctors in Josephine County, a totally unacceptable ratio, 1 to 900 residents. And until we solve this basic resource management issue, I think we've kind of outlined some of the issues by the panelists here. I really appreciate them kind of framing the conversation, but we're not going to have an economic base to tax, to improve our schools, to handle the PERS and healthcare issues that we have in this state. So we've got to really start at the ground level. And I wanted I wanted to highlight that because that just makes it important to everybody in this room, whether or not you're a conservationist, an environmentalist, or somebody who's an advocate for timber harvest. I think there's a way to get to be an advocate for forest management, regardless of where you sit politically or ecologically on that spectrum. There's a lot of sound science out there that I think everybody's kind of waking up to that says the status quo, doing nothing, puts everybody at harm, and not just the timber industry. I think everybody who relies on this beautiful place to live. We rate very well as a livability area nationally. We rate very poorly as far as a place to do business, to retire to, for those health benefits and all those other aspects that everybody really holds valuable. And so we need to broaden that conversation. I want to encourage everybody to get involved in this. I think the state legislature has. We've got good progress on the federal House side. We need to put some pressure on the Senate side to say, I know it's going to be challenging to get some sort of a federal fix to this. I'm not as pessimistic. I've got the governor's garb on. I'm pulling up that optimism that he's come into the room with every single meeting. And we're going to get something done because things are going to get a lot worse if we don't fix it. And I'd rather nip it early. I say early, but we've had this problem for 25 years. Doug Roberts, who's a commissioner, finished up his 32nd year, has been working on this pretty much since he got elected. And so that's exactly what I stepped into the ring, got off the couch to do, and I'm committed to it. And I think everybody in this room ought to kind of feel that same way, that commitment to solving this issue, because it's real. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I know we're out of time, so we're just